The Simpsons has been on the air since December 17th, 1989, 36 seasons, over 800 episodes. It is the longest-running primetime animated series in the history of American television. The longest-running scripted primetime show, period. Longer than Gunsmoke, longer than Law and Order, longer than anything anyone thought a cartoon about a yellow family in a fictional town in an unnamed state could possibly last. And in all that time, across every single one of those episodes, across every Christmas special and Treehouse of Horror and clip show and guest appearance by a Hall of Fame athlete or an Oscar-winning actress or a former president, something has been quietly happening in living rooms and bedrooms all across the world that nobody has ever properly documented. People are falling asleep to this show, not because it is boring. That is not what this is. The Simpsons at its best is one of the sharpest, most intellectually layered comedies ever produced. It won the Peabody Award in 1996, making it the first animated series in history to receive that honor. It has taken home 37 Primetime Emmy Awards. Time magazine named it the greatest television series of the 20th century. This is not a show people fall asleep to because it fails to hold their attention. They fall asleep to it because Springfield is safe. Think about that for a second. Not the content, not the jokes, not the specific episodes, the place itself. Springfield, wherever it is, whatever state it is hidden in, is a town that never changes. Homer Simpson is still working at the Springfield nuclear power plant. Marge is still standing in the kitchen. Bart is still 10 years old. Lisa is still 8. Maggie is still on that pacifier. And none of them have aged a single day since the premiere aired on a Sunday night in December of 1989, which was 36 years ago. That permanence is not a continuity error. That permanence is the entire point. In December of 2025, Disney announced that The Simpsons had surpassed 1 billion hours streamed on Disney Plus during that year alone. 1 billion hours. Now consider what that number actually means. If you stacked every minute of every Simpsons episode ever made end to end, the entire run of the show would take you approximately 273 hours to watch from start to finish. 1 billion streaming hours is roughly 3.5 million full playthroughs of the entire series. And that is 1 year. That is one platform. Not all of those people were paying close attention. A significant portion of that 1 billion hours was playing softly in the background of someone's bedroom. Someone had put it on after a long day. Someone was lying on their side with the volume turned down, watching the familiar yellow shapes move across the screen. Someone let the opening credits roll and the Danny Elfman theme play, and then they were already halfway gone before the couch gag was over. They did not fall asleep because The Simpsons failed them. They fell asleep because The Simpsons succeeded at something almost no other show on television has ever managed to do. It became a place. Tonight, we are going to rank every category of Simpsons episode on a single scale. From the episodes that will absolutely, categorically, with zero exceptions, keep you awake until 2 in the morning, all the way down to the episodes that exist at the precise intersection of narrative comfort, orchestral warmth, and emotional safety that makes your eyelids feel like they are made of something heavier than they were an hour ago. We are going to go era by era, season by season, episode by episode. And by the time we are finished, you are going to have a complete, vetted, fact-checked guide to the perfect Simpsons sleep experience. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you are enjoying this breakdown. Now let us start with the thing that makes this entire ranking possible. Because you cannot rank episodes on their sleep value if you do not first understand what sleep value actually is. And it turns out there are exactly 5 things that determine whether a given Simpsons episode is going to carry you into unconsciousness or keep you wide awake and thinking until the credits roll. The first one is pacing. This is the most important factor on this list. And the reason it is the most important factor is that The Simpsons was not always the same show. The series people think of when they say The Simpsons, the show they fell in love with, is almost always the classic era. That is the period from roughly season 1 through season 8, covering 1989 to 1997. During that time, the show moved at a pace that matched the rhythms of everyday life. Storylines unfolded, scenes breathed, characters sat in rooms and had conversations that went where they were supposed to go without suddenly cutting to a celebrity cameo or an action sequence or a parody of something that was popular that particular year. The classic era moved slowly, and it moved slowly with confidence. The writers were not afraid to let a scene play out. They were not afraid to let Homer stand in the backyard at night looking up at the stars while Alf Clausen's orchestra did something gentle with the brass section. They were not afraid of silence. They were not afraid of a moment that did not have a punchline. That changed. Critics and longtime fans use a specific phrase for what happened to the show after roughly season 9 in 1997. They call it Zombie Simpsons. The BBC noted in 2010 that the common consensus placed the end of the show's golden era somewhere around that transition. The stories became louder, the plots became more kinetic, guest stars arrived with increasing frequency and increasing demands for screen time. The pace accelerated in ways that felt exciting in the short term and exhausting in the long run. For sleep purposes, this is the single most consequential shift in the show's history. A classic-era Simpsons episode takes its time getting where it is going. A late-era Simpsons episode is always in a hurry to get there, and a brain that is trying to fall asleep does not want to be rushed. It wants to be accompanied slowly into somewhere comfortable. So the first thing we are always asking about any given episode is simple. Does this episode move like someone who has somewhere to be, or does it move like someone who is happy exactly where they are? The second pillar is stakes. This one is straightforward once you see it, but it took years of watching the show to properly articulate. The best sleep episodes share a common characteristic. The outcome never feels like it matters all that much, not because the writing is bad or the emotional content is shallow, but because the stakes are deliberately calibrated to something that resembles normal life. Homer wants a new grill, Marge wants to take a painting class, Bart wants to avoid taking a test on a book he did not read, Lisa wants to make a new friend at school. These are the situations that carry the greatest sleep value, because when the stakes are that human, that specific, that small in the grand scheme of things, your brain does not need to stay on alert. There is no danger, there is no threat, there is just a family trying to navigate Tuesday. Compare that to the episodes where Springfield faces destruction, or a major character appears to die, or an elaborate mystery unfolds across multiple acts that requires active attention to follow. Those episodes are brilliant. Some of them are the most celebrated pieces of television in the show's history. But they are not sleep episodes. They are event episodes. And the difference matters enormously when you are lying in the dark at 11:30 on a Wednesday. Low stakes are not the same as low quality. That is not what this is. Lisa's Substitute, which is Season 2, Episode 19, is one of the most emotionally precise and quietly devastating episodes in the entire run. Its stakes are as small as stakes can get. A substitute teacher is kind to a little girl. He leaves, she cries, he left her a note. And that is it. Those are the stakes. And it is one of the best episodes of television ever made, and it will put you to sleep faster than almost anything else in the catalog. The third pillar is music. This one does not get talked about enough. Alf Clausen became the primary composer of The Simpsons in Season 2, and scored the show for 27 consecutive years, writing or orchestrating music for nearly 600 episodes. He conducted a live 35-piece orchestra for the show's underscore. 35 musicians in a recording studio playing original orchestral music for a cartoon about a yellow family in a made-up town. Let that settle for a moment. The emotional architecture of The Simpsons for most of its run was built by a man with a full orchestra at his disposal, and he used that orchestra differently depending on what was happening on screen. When Homer was in danger, Clausen wrote danger music. When the Treehouse of Horror episodes needed to feel genuinely scary, he scored them like a horror film. When things exploded or chases happened or someone fell off something high, he wrote the kind of music that kept you awake. But for the domestic episodes, for the Tuesday night episodes about Homer wanting a new grill or Marge taking a painting class, for the moments where the family was simply existing together in Springfield without anything terrible threatening to happen, for those moments, Alf Clausen wrote something that sounds like a lullaby for adults. Warm woodwinds, gentle brass, the kind of orchestral underscore that your body does not experience as music so much as it experiences it as permission. Permission to stop paying attention, permission to let the familiar shapes on the screen blur slightly, permission to go somewhere else. In 2017, the production company made a cost-cutting decision and replaced Alf Clausen with a company called Bleeding Fingers Music, co-founded by Hans Zimmer and Russell Emanuel. The episodes they scored are technically competent. They do not sound like Alf Clausen. They do not sound like 35 musicians who have been accompanying the Simpson family through 27 years of ordinary life. The warmth changed. The specific sonic texture that made Springfield feel like home changed. And for sleep purposes, this matters. The Clausen-era episodes carry a musical weight that the post-2017 episodes simply do not have. So when you are building your sleep playlist, and we are going to build one by the end of this, you are almost always better off in the Clausen years. The fourth pillar is familiarity. The ideal sleep episode is one you have already seen. This is not an accident, and it is not laziness. There is a specific and well-documented psychological reason why familiar content is more conducive to sleep than unfamiliar content. When you watch something you have never seen before, your brain stays partially awake to track the new information. Who is this character? What is happening? How does this resolve? Those are the questions that keep the lights on upstairs. When you watch something you have already seen, your brain does not need to ask those questions. It already knows the answers. It can settle into the story the way you settle into a chair you have sat in 1,000 times. You are not discovering the destination. You're just riding towards somewhere you have been before, and that is an entirely different experience. This is also why, for all the criticism they receive as creative exercises, the clip shows in The Simpsons are genuinely extraordinary sleep content. So it's come to this, a Simpsons clip show, which is Season 4, Episode 18. Another Simpsons clip show, which is Season 6, Episode 3. All Singing, All Dancing, which is Season 9, Episode 11. All of these episodes are universally panned by critics and fans alike as lazy filler. All of them are among the single most effective sleep episodes in the entire 800-plus episode catalog. Because you already know every clip. You have seen every scene. There is nothing to follow. There is no new information. There is just Alf Clausen playing something warm underneath footage you have seen a dozen times, and that is exactly what your brain needs at 11:30 on a Wednesday. The fifth and final pillar is emotional temperature. This is the hardest one to define, but you know it the moment you feel it. There is a specific register that the best Simpsons sleep episodes live in. It is not happiness, exactly. It is not sadness. It is something in between. The specific feeling of watching Homer do something foolish, watching Marge sigh, watching the foolish thing resolve into something unexpectedly tender, and watching the family end up together anyway. That emotional temperature has a name. It is warm melancholy, and it is The Simpsons' greatest contribution to the emotional vocabulary of American television. Warm melancholy does not spike your cortisol. It does not make your heart beat faster. It does not keep you thinking about what you just saw after the credits roll. It just sits with you for a moment, somewhere between a smile and something softer, and then it lets you go. And that is exactly what you need from the last thing you watch before you close your eyes. The episodes that cannot achieve warm melancholy, for whatever reason, tend to fall into other emotional categories that are incompatible with sleep. Genuine tension, genuine sadness, sharp satirical anger, chaotic absurdism, all of these are legitimate emotional registers, and all of them have produced great television, but none of them are going to carry you into unconsciousness at the end of a long day. So those are the 5 pillars: pacing, stakes, music, familiarity, and emotional temperature. Everything that follows is measured against these 5 things. Every tier, every episode, every season. This is the framework. This is the key. And now we are going to use it. Let us start at the bottom, or depending on how you look at it, the top. Because the episodes we are about to discuss are not bad episodes. Several of them are masterpieces. Several of them are sitting comfortably at the top of the show's all-time rankings on every major platform and publication that has ever attempted to rank them. But they are the absolute worst possible episodes to fall asleep to. They are engineered, sometimes deliberately, sometimes accidentally, to keep you alert and engaged and paying close attention. They are the opposite of what we need tonight. This is F tier. These are the episodes that will not just fail to put you to sleep. They will actively wake you up if you're already drifting. The first entry in F tier is a 2-part story that aired across 2 separate seasons and generated more conversation, more theories, more viewer participation, and more genuine suspense than any other episode The Simpsons has ever produced. Who Shot Mr. Burns, Parts 1 and 2. Part 1 aired on May 21st, 1995 as Season 6, Episode 25. Part 2 aired on September 17th, 1995 as Season 7, Episode 1. Part 1 was written by Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein. The premise is exactly what it sounds like. Mr. Burns, Springfield's ancient billionaire industrialist, gets shot. The entire town is a suspect. The episode ends on a cliffhanger that the entire production deliberately kept secret throughout the summer of 1995, running a contest that invited viewers to guess the shooter before the answer was revealed in the fall. Now here's the thing about these two episodes that makes them categorically impossible to sleep to. They are structured like a genuine mystery, not like a cartoon parody of a mystery. Like an actual whodunit where the evidence is planted in specific scenes, where character motivations are established and tracked, where the final reveal requires the audience to have been paying attention to details from earlier in the episode. The production team planted real clues throughout Part 1 that pointed to the eventual answer. They constructed a narrative puzzle and invited the audience to solve it. Your brain cannot disengage from a genuine puzzle, not even if you have seen the answer before, because the scenes in these episodes are designed to trigger the part of your brain that organizes information and looks for patterns, and that part of your brain does not have an off switch. The moment you recognize the setup of a mystery, the investigative function activates. And an activated investigative brain is not a sleeping brain. The score reinforces this. The music across these two episodes is not Alf Clausen doing his warm domestic woodwind work. It is Alf Clausen at his most deliberately cinematic, writing suspense cues and dramatic stings that belong in a thriller. The strings are tense. The brass is foreboding. Every musical moment is calibrated to keep you on the edge of something. Sleep rating, impossible. Even if you know who did it, even if you have seen these episodes a dozen times. The mystery architecture does not sleep. The second F-tier entry is the highest rated episode in the show's history according to IMDb, where it sits at 9.3 out of 10 with a massive volume of user ratings. That score is not a coincidence. The episode earned it, but earning a 9.3 is functionally incompatible with falling asleep. Homer's Enemy, Season 8, Episode 23. It aired on May 4th, 1997. It was written by John Swartzwelder, who is the most prolific individual writer in the show's history with 59 credited episodes. It was directed by Jim Reardon. The premise is deceptively simple. A new employee named Frank Grimes arrives at the Springfield nuclear power plant. Frank Grimes has worked hard for everything he has. He grew up in poverty. He put himself through school. He earned his qualifications through sustained effort and sacrifice. And he arrives at his new job to find that Homer Simpson, who has none of those qualifications and who has done none of that work, is inexplicably thriving. Homer has a loving wife, a house, a car, a boat, and a job at a nuclear plant, despite being visibly incompetent at every observable level. Frank Grimes cannot process this. He cannot reconcile the world as it is with the world as it is supposed to be. And the episode follows his slow psychological unraveling as Homer's unearned success exposes the fundamental unfairness at the core of things. Here is the reason this episode is impossible to sleep to. It does not just make you laugh. It makes you feel something uncomfortable and real underneath the laughter. Because Frank Grimes is right. Everything he says about Homer is true. Every grievance he has is legitimate. And the episode does not resolve that tension. It does not offer him redemption or relief. It follows him to his conclusion, which is a complete breakdown. And then it ends with Homer falling asleep at Frank Grimes' funeral. That image, Homer asleep, drooling, while the people around him mourn. That is not a warm image. That is a disturbing image dressed in cartoon clothes. And it is the kind of image that your brain keeps processing long after the episode is over. You do not drift off peacefully into unconsciousness after Homer's Enemy. You lie in the dark and think about Frank Grimes, sleep rating, impossible. Not because of pacing or music or familiarity, because of what the episode makes you feel, and how long it keeps making you feel it. The third F-tier category is the one that requires almost no explanation but needs to be said clearly and definitively so there is no ambiguity. Every Treehouse of Horror episode, all of them. The Treehouse of Horror episodes are the annual Halloween anthology specials that the show has produced every year since Season 2. The first one aired on October 25th, 1990 as Season 2, Episode 3, and the tradition has continued through season 37, which produced Treehouse of Horror 36. Each episode consists of 3 non-canonical short segments that parody horror films, science fiction, fantasy, and folklore, typically featuring the regular cast in scenarios that could never happen in the show's actual continuity. They are beloved, they are creative, they contain some of the most inventive and ambitious storytelling the show has ever attempted. Treehouse of Horror 5, which is Season 6, Episode 6, contains The Shining, which is a shining parody that is often cited as one of the funniest things the show ever did. Time and Punishment in that same episode is a time travel story that builds to a genuinely satisfying and absurd conclusion. Nightmare Cafeteria takes the premise of school budget cuts somewhere genuinely dark. But here's the fundamental problem with every single Treehouse of Horror episode from a sleep perspective: they are specifically designed to be stimulating. The horror genre, even in comedic parody form, relies on alertness. Jump cuts, tense music, unexpected imagery, and the basic psychological machinery of suspense all require your brain to stay on. The special scoring for these episodes is not Alf Clausen's warm domestic underscore. It is Alf Clausen doing his best Bernard Herrmann impression, building tension with strings that cut rather than comfort. And they are non-canonical, which means they do not settle into the familiar rhythms of Springfield. The characters behave differently, the rules are different, the world is different. Even if you have seen a particular Treehouse of Horror episode many times, your brain cannot fully relax into it the way it can relax into a domestic episode, because the domestic episode promises that everything will be fine by the end, and the Treehouse of Horror does not make that promise. Sleep rating, impossible, every one of them. The 4th F-tier entry is one of the most critically acclaimed and audience-beloved episodes in the Golden Era, and one of the most effective comedies the show ever produced, and it is completely incompatible with sleep for a reason that has nothing to do with stakes or tension or disturbing content. Cape Fear, Season 5, Episode 2. It aired on October 7th, 1993. Sideshow Bob, voiced by Kelsey Grammer, has been released from prison and is immediately and single-mindedly focused on murdering Bart Simpson. The episode is a parody of the 1991 Martin Scorsese thriller Cape Fear, which was itself a remake of the 1962 film. The entire episode is built around the escalating threat of a genuinely dangerous antagonist pursuing a child with real murderous intent. Sideshow Bob hides under Bart's car. He tattoos "Die Bart Die" on his chest and explains to the parole board that it is German for the Bart the. He steps on rakes, many, many rakes. That rake scene. If you know The Simpsons even casually, you know the rake scene. Sideshow Bob, arriving at the Simpsons houseboat moored along a riverbank, steps on a rake. The handle swings up and hits him in the face. He steps on another rake. The handle swings up and hits him in the face. This repeats and repeats and repeats until it has gone so far past the point where it should have stopped being funny that it has looped back around to being funny again. It is one of the most technically precise comedic sequences the show ever constructed. And that precision is exactly the problem. The rake scene is funny specifically because you are fully awake and paying attention. The comedy builds through repetition and your brain's constant recalibration of when it should finally end. A brain that is half asleep cannot track that. A brain that is half asleep just registers someone getting hit in the face with a rake handle over and over and experiences it as vaguely violent and confusing. Cape Fear is a masterpiece. It is also categorically impossible to sleep to. The threat is too real. The comedy is too precise. Kelsey Grammer's performance is too electric. Your brain will not let it go. Sleep rating, very low. The 5th and final F-tier entry is one that might surprise you slightly because on the surface it sounds gentle. It is a musical episode after all. It is about nostalgia. It is about the past. And nostalgia should be a sleep-friendly emotional register. But Homer at the Bat, Season 3, Episode 17, which aired on February 20th, 1992, has a problem that overrides all of those calming qualities. It has 8 real Major League Baseball players in it. Roger Clemens, Wade Boggs, Ken Griffey Jr., Steve Sachs, Ozzie Smith, Jose Canseco, Don Mattingly, Darryl Strawberry, 8 active Major League players, all voiced by themselves, all given their own individual storylines within the episode, all arriving in Springfield for the big game. The episode was a genuine cultural event when it aired. It pulled in extraordinary viewership for a cartoon. It was the kind of appointment television that made people call their friends beforehand. And that is the exact problem. The episode is designed to be an event. It is calibrated to the energy of a sporting occasion, which is inherently the opposite of sleep-inducing. Guest stars, especially celebrity guest stars playing themselves, demand attention by their nature. Your brain recognizes a real person's voice and immediately tries to track their performance. Are they good? Are they funny? What is happening with their character? That tracking function is incompatible with drifting off. Sleep rating, low. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you are enjoying this breakdown. Those are the episodes that will keep you up. Now let us move towards something more useful. C tier is the most populated tier on this entire ranking. These are the episodes that most people think of when they think of watching The Simpsons casually. They are good episodes. Many of them are beloved episodes. Some of them are considered classics, and none of them will reliably carry you to sleep because all of them have something that keeps at least a portion of your brain engaged and alert. A particularly great joke, a narrative turn that requires active attention, a guest performance that demands to be noticed, something. The C-tier episodes are the ones you put on when you want background company but are not yet ready to sleep. When you're still doing something else, when you want to feel the presence of Springfield without actually needing to close your eyes. They are companionable in the way that a slightly energetic friend is companionable. Good to have around, not quite restful. The first C-tier entry is perhaps the most famous single episode of The Simpsons ever written, and the fact that it cannot carry you to sleep is entirely the fault of how brilliantly it was constructed. Marge versus the Monorail. Season 4, Episode 12. It aired on January 14th, 1993. The writer was Conan O'Brien, who was on the show's writing staff during Seasons 3 and 4 before leaving for late-night television. This was the episode that Conan O'Brien has cited as his proudest work from his time on the show. It is the episode that many critics and fans point to as the single greatest achievement in the show's entire history. The story begins with Springfield receiving a massive settlement from Mr. Burns after he is caught illegally dumping nuclear waste in the park. The town meeting that follows is supposed to allocate the money responsibly, but a fast-talking con man named Lyle Lanley, voiced by Phil Hartman, arrives and delivers a musical number so persuasive that the entire town votes to spend the money on a monorail instead. Homer gets the job of monorail conductor. The monorail, of course, is a fraud. It has no brakes. The premiere ride turns into a runaway disaster that only Homer can stop. Now here's the problem. This episode is funny, not just funny in the way that most Simpsons episodes are funny in a way that is almost aggressive. Every single scene in Marge vs. the Monorail contains a joke that lands with enough force to keep you alert. The musical number that Lyle Lanley performs, which is modeled on The Music Man, is one of the most perfectly constructed comedy songs in the show's history. Phil Hartman's performance is electric. The escalating chaos of the monorail ride is staged with the kind of precision that requires you to be watching to appreciate it. You will laugh, repeatedly, audibly. And laughter is physiologically incompatible with falling asleep. Not because laughter is unpleasant, but because the physical act of laughing briefly activates your body in a way that pulls you out of the drowsy state that sleep requires. The best sleep episodes do not make you laugh out loud. They make you smile in the dark. There is a meaningful difference between those two experiences, and Marge vs. the Monorail is firmly in the laughing out loud category. It is also a Phil Hartman episode, and Phil Hartman's voice has a quality that your brain refuses to tune out. It is too distinct, too performative, too alive with comedic intention. The moment Hartman opens his mouth, your full attention follows. His sleep rating, low to medium. The second C-tier entry is one of the most structurally ambitious episodes the show ever attempted. 22 short films about Springfield aired on April 14, 1996, as Season 7, Episode 21. It was written by a group of the show's staff writers and directed by Jim Reardon. The premise is a departure from the standard episode format. Rather than following the Simpson family through a single A-plot and B-plot, this episode presents a series of short vignettes following various Springfield residents through an ordinary day. The Lovejoys, Chief Wiggum, Dr. Nick, Snake, Nelson, Ned Flanders, Professor Frink. The episode jumps from character to character in short sketches that are only loosely connected by time and place. One of those sketches is Steamed Hams. Principal Skinner has invited Superintendent Chalmers to his home for dinner. He burns the roast and secretly orders hamburgers from Krusty Burger, claiming they are his own preparation. He calls them as steamed hams, which is an Albany expression. Chalmers notices that the burgers look exactly like fast food. Skinner insists they are not. The kitchen catches fire. Skinner insists the fire is not happening. Everything escalates. Neither man acknowledges reality. Steamed Hams is, at this point, one of the most reproduced and referenced pieces of content the show has ever produced. It exists as a meme in a way that almost no other Simpsons segment does. And that ubiquity is exactly the problem. The moment Steamed Hams begins, your brain activates. You know what is coming. You are tracking the escalation not as a passive viewer, but as someone who knows the beats and is enjoying seeing them executed. That tracking is not sleep. That tracking is engagement. The vignette structure of 22 short films also works against sleep in a specific way. Each short segment is essentially a reset. A new character, a new story, a new comedic setup. Your brain cannot settle into a rhythm because the rhythm keeps changing. The mental re-engagement required by each transition keeps you slightly awake even when any individual segment might theoretically be gentle enough to drift through. Sleep rating. Low to medium. The third C-tier entry might surprise you because it is one of the most emotionally resonant early episodes, and it deals directly with childhood anxiety in a way that is achingly relatable. Bart gets an F. Season 2, Episode 1. It aired on October 11, 1990. It was written by David M. Stern. This is the most watched episode in the show's history. Approximately 33.6 million viewers tuned in when it first aired, making it the highest-rated episode the series ever produced and, at the time, the highest-rated program in Fox network history. It beat The Cosby Show. Bart is failing 4th grade. He is one test away from being held back. He needs to pass Mrs. Krabappel's history exam or he will repeat the year. He tries to study, he fails to study, he makes a deal with the class brain, Martin Prince, to trade social coaching for academic help. He wakes up on the morning of the test to discover that a snowstorm has canceled school, and he spends the day playing instead of using the unexpected gift of time to study. He fails the exam, he breaks down in tears, he tells Mrs. Krabappel that he does know things, he just cannot prove it on the test. And then, in the moment when the episode earns everything it has been building toward, Bart looks out at the snow and correctly cites a historical fact about George Washington at Valley Forge, because something in that scene connected with something in his actual knowledge. Mrs. Krabappel gives him the extra point. He passes, he cries, she cries. Here is the reason this does not work as a sleep episode despite being one of the most emotionally genuine stories the show ever told. The anxiety is real. The stakes, while technically small in the grand scheme, feel enormous to the character experiencing them. When you watch Bart fail that test and break down, you feel the failure with him. Your body does not experience that kind of emotional sympathy from a place of relaxation. It experiences it from a place of heightened attention. You are leaning toward the screen, not away from it. The emotional resolution is beautiful. But you have to be awake to earn it. Sleep rating, low to medium. The 4th C-tier entry is one that represents a recurring challenge in the later seasons. Behind the Laughter aired on May 21st, 2000 as Season 11, Episode 22. It was written by Tim Long, George Meyer, Mike Scully, and Matt Selman. The episode is a full parody of VH1's Behind the Music, the documentary series that followed famous musicians through their rise, fall, and attempted comeback. In this version, the Simpsons are presented as a real family who became famous by allowing cameras into their lives, and the documentary format explores their backstory, their creative process, their personal conflicts, and their eventual breakdown and reconciliation. The episode is formally brilliant. It is one of the most intellectually dense episodes of the show's run, because the joke is entirely structural. The comedy comes from the collision between the familiar biography show format and the surreal specifics of the Simpson family being treated as real celebrities. That collision requires active cognitive processing to appreciate. You cannot enjoy a structural joke from a drowsy state. You need to be fully awake to recognize what the format is and why the specific content is funny within it. Behind the Laughter also moves at the pace of its inspiration, which is the brisk, information-dense pace of a VH1 documentary. Things happen quickly, revelations arrive in rapid succession. The comedic escalation has a specific rhythm that does not match the slow, warm rhythm of a classic domestic Springfield episode. Sleep rating, medium, at best. The fifth C-tier entry is one that illustrates a specific problem with the show's abundant celebrity era. Homer at the bat, which we already addressed in F-tier in episodes like it from the middle seasons of the show, created a template that was repeated with varying success throughout the 90s. Celebrity guest stars appeared with increasing frequency and increasing demands for screen time. The episodes built around these appearances are almost uniformly poor sleep content, not because of their quality, but because of the fundamental nature of celebrity performance in a cartoon format. When you recognize a real person's voice, your brain allocates a specific kind of attention to tracking that performance. Are they good? Are they comfortable? Are they funny on their own? Or are they being carried by the writing? These are questions your brain asks automatically, and asking them is not compatible with drifting towards sleep. This applies to the episodes featuring Phil Hartman as Lionel Hutz or Troy McClure because Hartman was too brilliantly alive in those roles to ignore. It applies to the Dustin Hoffman episode, Lisa's Substitute, in a complicated way that we will address in a later tier. It applies to the Albert Brooks appearances because Albert Brooks is one of the funniest performers who ever lived, and his improvisational energy is fundamentally incompatible with relaxation. Sleep rating for the celebrity-heavy middle-era episodes as a category. C. Enjoyable, companionable, not restful. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you are enjoying this breakdown. B tier. The reliable options. B tier is where things get genuinely useful. These are the episodes you can put on with reasonable confidence that you will be asleep sometime during or shortly after their runtime. They are not the perfect sleep episodes. The perfect sleep episodes are coming. But these are dependable. These are the workhorse episodes that have been sending people to sleep since the early 90s. And they will keep doing it long after you finish this video. The common denominator across all B-tier episodes is that they are warm without being inert. They have plots, they have jokes, they have life in them, but the life is calibrated to something your body can follow without staying fully awake. The first B-tier entry is the series premiere itself, and it deserves more credit as a sleep episode than it typically receives. Simpsons Roasting on an Open Fire. Season 1, Episode 1. It aired on December 17, 1989. It was written by Mimi Pond and directed by David Silverman. The story is simple in the way that all genuinely good Simpsons stories are simple. Homer discovers that he is not going to receive his Christmas bonus from the plant. Marge's Christmas fund, which she had been secretly building, has to be spent removing a tattoo that Bart got on a dare. The family has no money for Christmas. Homer secretly takes a second job as a mall Santa Claus, which pays almost nothing. He takes his meager earnings to a dog racing track on the advice of his friend Barney, betting everything on a last-minute entry named Santa's Little Helper, numbered 8, because the Christmas-inspired name seems like a sign. Santa's Little Helper finishes last. Devastated, Homer watches as the dog's handler discards the animal for losing. Homer adopts the dog. He brings Santa's Little Helper home on Christmas morning. The family, who was expecting nothing, receives instead a dog. They are happy. The Christmas setting alone gives this episode a specific kind of warmth that almost no other setting in television can replicate. Christmas is the warmest narrative context in the English language. The domestic stakes, a family trying to have a decent holiday despite financial strain, are calibrated exactly to the level that generates warm melancholy without generating genuine distress. The resolution, finding a family member instead of money, is one of the most quietly perfect endings the show ever produced. The Season 1 animation has a quality that also contributes to sleep value. It is rougher than what came later. The lines are less clean, the colors are slightly more muted, the characters move in a slightly looser, less polished way. This gives the episode a handmade quality that feels like old Saturday morning cartoons, and old Saturday morning cartoons are among the most reliably sleep-inducing content in the television archive. There is something about slightly imperfect early-era animation that your brain registers as safe and familiar in a very specific and very old way. Sleep rating, B+. The second B-tier entry is one of the most talked about episodes from the show's golden era, and its sleep value comes from a quality that is almost impossible to describe without sounding slightly mystical. Lisa's Wedding, Season 6, Episode 19. It aired on March 19, 1995. It was written by Greg Daniels. A fortune teller at a Renaissance fair shows Lisa a vision of her future. It is the year 2010. Lisa is engaged to a well-mannered, cultured young Englishman named Hugh Parkfield, voiced by Mandy Patinkin. They are students at a prestigious university. Hugh is everything that future Lisa's world has to offer in the way of romantic prospects, gentle and intelligent and sincere. He comes to Springfield to meet the family before the wedding. He finds Springfield difficult to navigate. He finds Homer, in particular, impossible to accept. The wedding does not happen. Hugh cannot bring himself to stay. Lisa wakes up, back in the present, back in the Renaissance fair, still a small girl. She finds Homer. She hugs him. The reason this episode has strong sleep value is the frame. The entire story is a vision of the future, which means it has the texture of a dream. You are not watching what is happening, you are watching what might happen. And the brain's relationship to potential, to the speculative future, is softer than its relationship to the present. You can let a future soften at the edges in a way that you cannot let a present do. The Springfield of 2010 in this vision is warm and slightly blurred, the way futures always are. The emotional core, the relationship between a little girl and her father, is so gently painful and so completely resolved in the final hug that it lands in exactly the warm, melancholy register that this whole exercise is built around. The Mandy Patinkin performance is also worth noting. Patinkin brings a genuine gentleness to Hugh that many guest performances on this show did not manage. He is not performing, he is present. And presence, real quiet presence, is a sleep-compatible quality in a way that most celebrity energy is not. Sleep rating, a minus. The third B-tier entry is the episode that many longtime fans point to as the single most emotionally precise thing the show ever produced, and its sleep value is almost exactly as high as its artistic value. And Maggie Makes 3, Season 6, Episode 13. It aired on January 22, 1995. It was written by Jennifer Crittenden. Homer is sitting at the table looking through the family's photo album. Bart and Lisa notice that there are no pictures of Maggie anywhere. Homer sits them down and tells them why. What follows is a flashback story. Homer had been working at the nuclear plant for years, hating every day of it, putting away money with a single dream in mind. He wanted to quit. He wanted to work at the bowling alley, a job that paid less and carried no prestige but made him happy in a way the plant never had. And finally, with enough savings to make it possible, he quit. He stood on the steps of the nuclear plant and he was free. He went to work at the bowling alley. He was genuinely, completely, uncomplicatedly happy. And then Marge became pregnant with their third child. Homer had to go back. He had to return to the plant. Mr. Burns, who enjoyed the power of having Homer need something from him, made Homer's return contingent on humiliation. He had a plaque installed at Homer's workstation. It read, "Don't forget, you're here forever." Homer took the job. The baby arrived. And Maggie, though she cannot speak, understands something that the rest of the family does not. She loves her father. She reaches for him. She watches for him. She is the reason he went back. The final scene of this episode is Homer's workstation. The plaque that reads, "Don't forget, you're here forever," is still there. But Homer has covered the letter with photographs of Maggie, arranged so that the visible words now read, "Do it for her." There are 12 words in that image. 12 words in a children's cartoon on a plaque in a nuclear power plant, and they contain more concentrated emotional truth than most full-length dramas manage in their entire runtime. This episode does not have high stakes, it does not have a villain, it does not have a mystery or a chase or an action sequence. It has a father who went back to the job he hated because his child needed him to, and who made peace with that by surrounding himself with her face. Sleep rating. A, consistent, reliable. The episode ends in a specific kind of quiet that your body knows what to do with. The fourth B-tier entry is one of the most warmly nostalgic episodes in the show's history, and its dreamlike, hazy quality makes it one of the more reliably sleep-adjacent entries in the golden era. Homer's Barbershop Quartet, Season 5, Episode 1. It aired on September 30th, 1993. It was written by Jeff Martin. At a swap meet, Bart and Lisa discover old merchandise from a band called the B-Sharps. Homer, it turns out, was in a barbershop quartet in the late 1980s, and the B-Sharps were briefly famous. Very briefly. But real. The episode follows Homer's memory of that period, including the auditions, the early performances, the unlikely success, the tensions that came with it, and the eventual breakup. The B-Sharps story is structured as an explicit parody of the Beatles' career arc. The lineup includes Homer, Principal Skinner, Apu, and initially Chief Wiggum, who is replaced by Barney Gumble. Barney then acquires a girlfriend, a silent Japanese woman who serves as the episode's Yoko Ono stand-in, and whose influence begins to fracture the group. The parody is loving and specific, but it does not require any Beatles knowledge to follow. The warmth of the episode comes from the period setting and from the quality of memory itself. Flashback episodes have a specific sleep value that present tense episodes do not share. When a story is presented as a memory, it has already happened. The stakes are resolved. The outcome is known. You're not watching something unfold toward an uncertain conclusion. You are watching something that has already resolved, being gently reconstructed in the amber light of recollection. That is one of the most sleep-compatible narrative textures in all of storytelling. The episode ends with the B-Sharps reuniting for one final performance on the roof of Moe's Tavern, with a small crowd watching from the street below. It is gentle, it is small, it is perfect. Sleep rating, B+. The fifth and final B-tier entry is a domestic episode from the middle period of the classic era that has the specific quality of being almost entirely conflict-free in its emotional core, which is rarer on this show than you might expect. Bart the Lover, Season 3, Episode 16. It aired on February 13th, 1992. It was written by John Vitti. Bart gets his hockey puck confiscated by Mrs. Krabappel after bringing it to school. In an act of revenge, he writes her a fake letter from a fictional man named Woodrow, attaching a photograph of a hockey player as the supposed sender. Mrs. Krabappel, who is lonely in a way the show has always handled with more grace than it usually receives credit for, responds to the letter with genuine warmth. Bart reads her response and feels something he did not expect to feel. He keeps the correspondence going. He starts to actually care. The B-plot involves Homer repeatedly swearing after hitting his thumb with a hammer. Marge decides the family needs to address the language issue, and they gather around the kitchen table to come up with replacement expressions for the words Homer uses. The family collaborates on alternatives. Deutsch, which Homer has been saying since the beginning, is not one of them. What they come up with instead is considerably more elaborate and considerably funnier. The reason Bart the Lover belongs in B tier and close to the top of it is the way both storylines resolve. The B-plot ends with the family deciding that Homer should just try harder. There is no dramatic resolution, no big moment, just a family working on a small problem together at a kitchen table and arriving at a reasonable conclusion. The A-plot ends with Bart writing Mrs. Krabappel a genuine letter, drafted with the help of his family, that is kind and honest and says the things that she needed to hear from someone, even if the someone is fictional. She smiles. The episode ends, that is it. That is the whole thing. A prank that became something real, and a family at a kitchen table trying to help a boy be decent to someone he hurt. That is warm melancholy at its most efficient. Sleep rating, A. We have arrived at the tier where sleep is not just possible, but probable. A-tier episodes are the ones that have been doing the work quietly and consistently for 3 decades, sending people off at a reliable rate and with a reliable gentleness. They are not the most celebrated episodes in the show's history. Some of them are barely remembered by casual fans. Some of them are the kind of episodes that get lost between the masterpieces and the disasters, living in the vast middle of an 800-plus episode catalog without the kind of critical attention that the very best and very worst episodes receive. But they work. That is the only qualification for A-tier. They work. The first A-tier entry is one of the earliest episodes in the show's run, and it demonstrates something important about the relationship between narrative simplicity and sleep value. Life on the Fast Lane. Season 1, Episode 9. It aired on March 18, 1990. It was written by John Swartzwelder. The story is one of the most domestic in the show's entire history. Homer buys Marge a bowling ball for her birthday, which is transparently a gift for himself since Marge does not bowl. Marge, in a quiet act of resistance, decides to actually learn to bowl. At the bowling alley, she meets a French bowling instructor named Jacques, voiced by Albert Brooks, who begins a slow and careful courtship. Marge is tempted. Homer, oblivious to the temptation, continues to be exactly the husband he has always been, which is to say, loving, in an imprecise and slightly distracted way. The episode is essentially a quiet examination of what it means to be seen. Jacques sees Marge in a specific way, with attention and intention in deliberate romance. Homer sees Marge in the way you see the furniture in your own house, which is to say you notice it when it is missing and take it for granted when it is present. Marge has to decide which kind of being seen matters more to her. The resolution is wordless. Marge drives past the lane to Jacques and goes instead to the nuclear plant. She walks into Homer's work area. He sees her. He knows immediately what it means that she is there. He picks her up. The episode ends with the two of them walking out together without a single line of dialogue in the final scene. Alf Clausen plays something large and warm underneath. This episode wins on all 5 pillars. The pacing is slow and deliberate. The stakes are domestic and human. The music is among the most emotionally generous Clausen ever wrote for the show. The emotional temperature is exactly warm melancholy. And the Albert Brooks performance, while charming, is understated enough that it does not keep you at attention the way a more aggressive guest performance would. Sleep rating. A. The second A-tier entry is one that requires a slightly longer setup because its sleep value is counterintuitive on the surface. A Millhouse Divided, Season 8, Episode 6. It aired on December 1st, 1996. It was written by Steve Tompkins. The episode begins at a dinner party at the Simpsons house. Homer and Marge are hosting the Van Houtens and several other Springfield couples. During dinner, an argument between Kirk and Luann Van Houten, Millhouse's parents, escalates until Luann announces that she wants a divorce. Kirk is blindsided. The marriage ends in the middle of a dinner party in someone else's living room. Homer watches this happen from across the table. And that night, lying in bed next to Marge, he has a thought that is simultaneously foolish and completely understandable. He realizes that he has taken his marriage for granted. He is terrified that his wife could one day decide, as Luann Van Houten did, that she is finished. He resolves to do something about it before that happens rather than after. What Homer does is characteristic of Homer in his best moments. He is not subtle. He is not sophisticated. He rents out a wedding chapel. He secretly contacts everyone from their original wedding. He invites Marge out under a false pretense and delivers her to the chapel, where he proposes again, and they renew their vows with everyone who was there the first time watching. The subplot follows Kirk Van Houten's collapse after the divorce. He loses his job, his apartment, and his dignity in roughly descending order. He records a single called "Can I Borrow a Feeling?", which is perhaps the single most perfectly pathetic thing any character in the show has ever created, and the tape he makes for himself is discovered by Luann and used as further evidence that the divorce was the correct decision. The sleep value of this episode is centered in Homer's subplot rather than Kirk's. The Kirk material is funny and sad in a sharp way that keeps you engaged. The Homer and Marge material is warm and slow and resolved with a gentleness that the episode earns. The scene of Homer delivering Marge to the chapel and Marge's expression shifting from confusion to understanding to something that might be the closest the show has ever come to depicting simple, uncomplicated love is an A-tier sleep moment. Sleep rating. A. The third A-tier entry is one of the most ambitious episodes the show produced in its later golden era, and its sleep value comes from a structural quality that is almost hypnotic. The Way We Was, Season 2, Episode 12. It aired on January 31st, 1991. It was written by Al Jean and Mike Rice. Homer and Marge are sitting at home watching television when the set breaks. To pass the time, Homer and Marge tell their children the story of how they met. It is 1974. Homer and Marge are both students at Springfield High School. Homer is cutting class in the bathroom and gets caught, and as punishment, he is assigned to a remedial French class. Marge is also in the French class, having enrolled voluntarily because she is genuinely interested in the language. Homer, who has absolutely no interest in French, decides that Marge is the most beautiful girl he has ever seen, and immediately develops an elaborate plan to spend more time with her. His plan involves pretending to need help with French so that she will tutor him. It works. They spend time together. Homer tells the family that this is the part where Marge fell for him. Marge tells the family that actually, at this point, she was in love with someone else entirely, the class president, who she thought was going to ask her to the prom. Homer discovers this. In desperation, he signs up to learn French horn in order to play at the prom, and at least be in the room. He is terrible at French horn. He performs anyway. The class president never asked Marge to the prom. Homer is the one who shows up. They dance. Marge sees something in the way Homer looked at her that she had not fully noticed before. When the episode ends and returns to the present, Homer and Marge are sitting on the couch together. The television is still broken. They do not need it. The sleep value of this episode is substantial and comes from multiple directions simultaneously. The flashback structure gives it the memory texture that works so well for sleep. The stakes are completely non-threatening. No one is in danger. The worst outcome is that Homer does not get off the girl, and the framing of the episode makes it clear from the beginning that he did. The period setting, 1974, gives the episode a soft, warm-tinted quality. The music Alf Clausen uses for the high school scenes is gentle and slightly nostalgic in a way that matches the subject. And the story itself, two people finding each other by accident, Homer succeeding not because he was clever or capable, but because he simply showed up and meant it, is one of the most sleep-compatible emotional narratives in the show's history. Nothing that happens in this episode is threatening. Everything that happens is small and real and human. Sleep rating, a plus. The fourth A-tier entry is a later classic-era episode that contains one of the most quietly devastating moments in the show's run, and it deserves more recognition as a sleep episode than it typically receives. A Tree Grows in Springfield. Season 24, Episode 6. It aired on November 25, 2012. It was written by Rob Lazebnik. Homer is depressed about his life in a general, unfocused way. His daughter Lisa, who loves him and who notices when he is not himself, purchases a raffle ticket at a school fundraiser in the hope that winning something might lift his spirits. Homer wins the raffle. The prize is a MyPad, which is the episode's version of an iPad, and Homer immediately becomes completely, almost pathologically attached to it. He carries it everywhere, he consults it for everything, and then, inevitably, he falls and breaks it. The depression returns, deeper than before, because now there is a specific thing to mourn. Homer finds himself standing in the backyard looking at the tree by the fence, and he notices something written on the bark. In the sap that has run down the trunk, the letters spell out the word hope. The town decides it is a miracle. Reporter Kent Brockman, who has built a career out of delivering breathless coverage of things that are not breathable, sets out to expose the fraud. He obtains thermal imaging footage from the night before the discovery that shows a person walking into the Simpsons' backyard and pressing their hand against the tree. Homer is devastated. The miracle was manufactured, but Marge tells him something that the episode has been quietly building toward. Whoever wrote that word on the tree, for whatever reason, they wrote it for him. They wrote it when he needed it. The message was real, even if the miracle was not. The episode ends with a final shot of Homer walking toward the backyard in his sleep. Sleepwalking. He is the one who wrote it. His own sleeping brain, his own unconscious need for hope, reached out in the night and left the message where he would find it. This is a quiet episode. It moves slowly. The stakes are entirely interior, entirely about how a person holds themselves together when they feel like the world is not cooperating. The resolution is gentle and slightly magical without being implausible. And Alf Clausen's underscore during the final sequence of Homer walking toward the tree is among the softest and most comforting music he wrote for the show in this era. Sleep rating. A. The fifth A-tier entry requires us to address the clip's shows honestly without the critical contempt that most discussion of them carries, because that contempt obscures something genuinely true about what these episodes do. So it's come to this. a Simpsons clip show. Season 4, Episode 18. It aired on April 1st, 1993. Another Simpsons clip show. Season 6, Episode 3. It aired on October 22nd, 1994. This one is focused specifically on romance and relationships, with Marge's reading of The Bridges of Madison County prompting the family to revisit their failed and near-failed relationships through clips from previous episodes. All Singing, All Dancing, Season 9, Episode 11. It aired on January 4th, 1998. Gump Roast, Season 13, Episode 17. It aired on April 21st, 2002. Every one of these episodes is widely considered to be among the least creatively interesting things the show ever produced. All Singing, All Dancing holds an extremely low rating on IMDb. Gump Roast is frequently included on lists of the worst Simpsons episodes ever made. The critical consensus on clip shows, not just in The Simpsons, but as a television device in general, is that they represent a failure of ambition and a disrespect for the audience. But here is what that consensus misses entirely. These episodes are the most effective sleep content in the show's entire run, not in spite of the fact that they consist entirely of footage you have already seen, because of it. The clip show is the purest expression of the familiarity pillar. There is nothing new to follow. There is no plot to track. There is no character development to process. There is only Alf Clausen playing warmly while scenes you have seen a dozen times unspool in their familiar order. Your brain has nothing to do but drift. The clip shows are the equivalent of falling asleep to a playlist of songs you know by heart. The songs are not surprising. They are not trying to be surprising. They are simply there, familiar and warm, giving you something to hold while you go somewhere else. Sleep rating, a plus. As pure sleep content, without any consideration of their creative merit, the clip shows are among the most functional episodes in the 800-plus episode catalog. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you are enjoying this breakdown. This is what everything has been building toward. S tier. These are the episodes that exist at the precise, specific, and unusually difficult to achieve intersection of all 5 pillars simultaneously. Slow pacing, low stakes, Alf Clausen at his warmest, familiar enough to let your guard down. An emotional temperature calibrated exactly to warm melancholy. There are not many of them. That is the nature of a tier at the very top of a ranking. If everything qualified, the tier would be meaningless. These are the episodes that have been sending people to sleep with an unusual and consistent reliability for decades. And the reason they work is not accidental. Every one of them has a specific quality, something in the way the plot is structured, or the way the emotions are handled, or the way the music sits underneath the scene, that makes them sleep compatible in a way that transcends the normal experience of watching television. Let us go through them carefully. The first S-tier entry is the episode that the entire show was built on, and its sleep value is inseparable from its emotional content. Simpsons roasting on an open fire was already discussed in B-tier as a reliable sleep option, but it belongs in S-tier for a reason that the B-tier discussion did not fully capture, and that reason is the dog. Santa's Little Helper is not just a sweet addition to the family. He is the resolution of a story about a man who failed, publicly and embarrassingly, at everything he tried to do for Christmas. Homer took a second job as a mall Santa. He got his feelings hurt by a child who sat on his lap and asked for a new dad. He took his Santa wages to a dog track and bet on a last-minute entry named Santa's Little Helper because the dog's Christmas name felt like an omen. Santa's Little Helper finished last. He had nothing. And what he found in that nothing was a creature who also had nothing, who also lost, who was being discarded by the people who were supposed to care for it. Homer and Santa's Little Helper recognize each other. That is what the episode is actually about. Not Christmas, not money, not presents. A man who feels like he is losing and a dog who is losing, finding each other in a parking lot at night. When Homer brings Santa's Little Helper home, the family does not receive what it expected. It receives what it needed. And the difference between those two things is the warmest idea The Simpsons ever had. Sleep rating, S, the Christmas setting, the quiet finale, the absence of any dramatic resolution in favor of a simple moment of connection. This episode sends you to sleep gently because it has already given you everything. The second S-tier entry is one we have already discussed in A-tier, and it is time to make the argument for why it deserves the highest rating, and Maggie makes 3. Season 6, Episode 13, January 22nd, 1995. We have already told the story. Homer quit the job he hated, he was happy, Marge got pregnant, he went back. Mr. Burns installed the plaque, Homer covered it with photos of Maggie. Do it for her. But there is something about this episode that the plot summary cannot fully capture, and it is the reason it belongs in S tier rather than A tier. It is the quality of the silence at the end. The final shot of this episode holds for a moment on Homer's workstation. The photos of Maggie covering the letters of the plaque, the modified message, and then Alf Clausen plays something that is not quite happy and not quite sad, something in between those two things that does not have a precise English word, but that every person who has ever sacrificed something for someone they love has felt in their chest. That feeling does not keep you awake. It does not make your heart race. It does not make you think harder or feel sharper or pay more attention to what is on the screen. It makes you go somewhere softer. It makes the muscles in your face do something that is close to a smile but quieter. And then it lets you go. Sleep rating. S, the most reliably effective sleep ending in the show's history. The third S-tier entry is one that rarely gets mentioned in discussions of the show's greatest episodes, and that obscurity is a large part of why it works so well as a sleep episode. Homer Loves Flanders. Season 5, Episode 16. It aired on March 17, 1994. It was written by David Richardson. Homer is trying desperately to get tickets to a Springfield Adams football game. He calls into a radio contest and fails. He pesters everyone he knows and gets nowhere. And then Ned Flanders, the annoyingly cheerful Christian neighbor that Homer has resented for years, wins 2 tickets on the same radio contest and immediately invites Homer to come with him. They go together. Homer has the time of his life. And he decides, based on this single experience, that Ned Flanders is his best friend. What follows is an episode that is structured as a gentle comedy of excess. Homer's enthusiasm for the new friendship is overwhelming in a way that Ned, who genuinely wants to be neighborly, finds difficult to manage. He follows Ned everywhere. He shows up at church. He invites himself on the Flanders family trip. He is too much in the specific and slightly desperate way that Homer is always too much when he wants something. And here's the thing about this episode. It does not end with a confrontation or a reconciliation or a big emotional moment. It ends with the friendship fading back to its natural state. Ned is mildly annoyed by Homer. Homer is mildly annoyed by Ned. The two of them are back to being what they have always been, which is neighbors who occasionally drive each other insane and who would never admit, even to themselves, that the other one matters. That ending is sleep perfect because it resolves completely to the status quo without drama. Nothing changed. Everything is fine. The world of Springfield has returned to its resting position, and that resting position is always exactly the same. Sleep rating. S. The fourth S-tier entry is the episode that may represent the absolute pinnacle of Alf Clausen's contribution to The Simpsons as a sleep artifact. Bart the General, Season 1, Episode 5. It aired on February 4th, 1990. It was written by John Swartzwelder. Bart is being bullied by Nelson Muntz, the school's resident tough guy, after a confrontation over some cupcakes that Bart's grandmother made for Lisa's teacher. Homer's advice is unhelpful. Marge's advice is well-intentioned and also unhelpful. Bart finds his grandfather, Grandpa, who introduces him to Herman, a one-armed military supplies dealer who lives above the shop, and Herman teaches Bart military strategy. Bart organizes the entire 3rd grade into an army, stages a siege, and defeats Nelson in a treaty negotiation. Nelson agrees, under duress, to stop bullying Bart. A formal document is signed. The episode ends. Now here's the reason Bart the General is an S-tier sleep episode despite having a more active plot than some of the other entries on this list. It is a Season 1 episode. And Season 1 episodes have a quality that the rest of the show never quite replicated because the show in its first season was still finding out what it was. The animation is rougher. The voice performances are slightly less settled, slightly more exploratory. The stories are smaller, the world is more intimate. Springfield in Season 1 is not yet the fully realized place it will become. It is still a sketch, and sketches have a warmth that finished paintings sometimes lose. The Alf Clausen _ for Season 1 episodes, though he was not yet the primary composer, established a template of warmth and gentleness that the early seasons wore like a coat. Bart the General, in particular, moves slowly and resolves completely. The resolution is slightly absurd, a treaty with a bully written on a piece of paper, but absurdity in Springfield is always safe. The world is too fundamentally decent to let absurdity become threatening. Sleep rating. S. The 5th S-tier entry is the most underrated episode on this entire ranking, and it has been sending people to sleep since the mid-90s without receiving a single word of credit for it. Homer loves Flanders, addressed above. No. The 5th entry is a different one, and it is the one that requires the most careful argument. Lisa's Substitute. Season 2. Episode 19. April 25th, 1991. Writer John Vitti. We have already discussed this episode in B tier, and at that point the argument was that its emotional content was too sharp to be a pure sleep episode. The grief that the episode generates, specifically in the scene where Lisa watches Mr. Bergstrom's train leave the station and then breaks down completely in the car with Homer, is a real emotional event. It is not gentle grief, it is the specific grief of a child who has lost someone who truly saw her, and that grief has a sharpness to it. But here's why the episode ultimately belongs in S tier rather than B tier. The final 2 minutes. Homer, who throughout this episode has been obtuse and cheerful and generally incapable of understanding what his daughter is going through, sits down with Lisa in her room. He does not try to explain. He does not try to fix it. He does not give advice. He asks her what she needs, and she tells him that she just needs time, and he says, okay. And then he holds her. And the note. Mr. Bergstrom left Lisa a note before he left. She carries it with her through the episode. She does not read it on screen until near the end. When she reads it, the camera does not show what it says until the moment is ready. And when it shows it, all it says is this: "You are Lisa Simpson." 5 words. Not that she is special, not that she is gifted, not that she will do great things, just that she is herself, and that being herself is the specific and irreplaceable thing she was afraid of losing. The episode ends with that note. It ends with a child understanding that she does not have to be anything other than what she is. And that understanding, wrapped in warm melancholy and Alf Clausen's most quietly gorgeous underscore, is one of the most reliable passages to sleep in the show's history. Sleep rating, S conditional. You need to have seen it before. Because the first time, the grief at the train station will keep you awake. But the second time, the third time, the 5th time, you already know the note is coming. And knowing the note is coming makes everything before it easier to carry. The 6th and final S-tier entry is one that appears in almost no ranking of the show's greatest episodes, and its absence from those rankings is related to the quality that makes it so valuable for sleep. Homer and Apu, Season 5, Episode 13. It aired on February 10th, 1994. It was written by Greg Daniels. Apu Nahasapima Petalon, the proprietor of the Quick E-Mart, sells Homer-tainted meat, and Homer is filmed for a consumer news segment. Apu is fired. He comes to live with the Simpsons while he tries to reclaim his job. He wins the job back after a journey to the head office of the Quick E-Mart Corporation in India. The episode ends with Apu back behind the counter. This sounds like a completely ordinary Simpsons premise. And it is. It is completely ordinary in the best possible way. The stakes are exactly low enough. The resolution is exactly warm enough. The episode moves at a pace that matches the rhythm of someone who is not in a hurry. The India sequence is gentle and slightly surreal without being chaotic. The ending is a simple return to the status quo. Apu is back. Homer buys something. Everything is fine. The reason this makes S tier is a single scene in the middle of the episode. Apu, staying with the Simpsons, is sitting on the couch with Homer late at night. And they talk, not about anything urgent, just about life, about what they want and what they have, and the gap between those two things. Homer is not wise. Apu is not despairing. They are two people sitting on a couch at night being honest with each other in the specific way that only happens late at night. That scene is one of the most sleep-compatible scenes in the entire run of the show. 2 people, a couch, a conversation that does not need to go anywhere. Night. Sleep rating, Tatakil S. Now we go through the entire run. Not every episode, because there are over 800 of them, and this video would need to be approximately 11 days long to do that properly. But every era, every period, every meaningful shift in what the show was, and how it moved, and what it sounded like, and how it felt to watch it at 11:30 at night with the lights already off. We are going to map the sleep value of The Simpsons season by season, era by era, from the rough, handmade warmth of the first season in 1989 all the way to the modern renaissance that is happening right now under showrunner Matt Selman. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you are enjoying this breakdown. Season 1, 1989 to 1990. The first season of The Simpsons is 13 episodes long. It premiered on December 17, 1989, with Simpsons roasting on an open fire. And the final episode of the season, Some Enchanted Evening, aired on May 13, 1990. The animation was handled primarily by Klasky Csupo, the studio founded by Gabor Csupo and Arlene Klasky, who had animated the characters since their appearance as Tracy Ullman Show shorts. The Season 1 animation is noticeably rougher and more energetic than what came later, with thicker, less precise lines and a looser sense of movement that many fans find charming precisely because of its imperfection. The sleep value of Season 1 is surprisingly high, not because the episodes are without energy or humor, they have plenty of both, but because the world of Springfield in its first year is still intimate and quiet. The stories are grounded in domestic life in a way that the show would occasionally stray from in later years. Homer is a working father who drinks beer and watches football and occasionally has a terrible idea. Marge is a patient woman trying to keep things together. Bart is a 10-year-old who wants to avoid his homework. Lisa is a gifted child who wants to be taken seriously. Maggie is a baby. These are not complicated characters in Season 1. They are archetypes drawn with enough warmth and specificity to feel real, but without the elaboration and exaggeration that later seasons would layer on top of them. And for sleep purposes, that simplicity is an asset. There is nothing in Season 1 that surprises you in a way that snaps you awake. There is nothing that demands your full cognitive attention. There is just a family trying to be a family in a town that is still small enough to feel like home. The first season also has a specific quality that all debut seasons have. It is slightly tentative, it is still finding its voice. And that tentativeness translates as gentleness. The show is not yet confident enough to be aggressive. It is offering itself to you quietly, asking if you want to come along. Overall sleep rating for Season 1, high, among the most sleep-friendly seasons in the show's history. Seasons 2 and 3, 1990 to 1992. These two seasons represent the first full flowering of what The Simpsons would become. The writing staff expanded. Al Jean and Mike Rice served as co-showrunners for Seasons 3 and 4. Conan O'Brien joined the writing staff. John Swartzwelder, who would go on to write 59 episodes and become the most prolific individual contributor in the show's history, was producing some of his earliest and most grounded work. Klasky Csupo continued to handle the animation through Season 3, giving the show a visual quality that was slightly cleaner than Season 1 but retained the handmade warmth of the early years. The stories in Seasons 2 and 3 are still domestic in their orientation, but they have more ambition. The emotional range expands. Lisa gets her most important early showcase in Lisa's Substitute, Season 2, Episode 19. Homer and Marge's relationship is deepened in The Way We Was, Season 2, Episode 12. Bart's relationship with authority, with his family, and with his own conscience is explored in ways that the first season only gestured toward. The sleep value of Seasons 2 and 3 is extremely high. These are the seasons that contain several of the S-tier and A-tier episodes we have already discussed. More importantly, the general tenor of these seasons is warm and domestic, and slow enough that even the episodes that are not canonical sleep masterpieces are still reliable B-tier content. Alf Clausen was settling into the role of primary composer during this period, developing the orchestral language that would define the show's sonic identity for the next 25 years. The music in Seasons 2 and 3 has a specific freshness to it, the warmth of someone who has recently found a tone they love and is exploring it joyfully. That exploration translated on screen as music that was simultaneously emotionally generous and lighter than what came later, when the orchestral vocabulary had been established and the choices became more deliberate. Overall sleep rating for Seasons 2 and 3, Very high, these are the most reliably sleep-friendly seasons in the show's history, possibly tied with Season 1, Seasons 4 through 6, 1992 to 1995. This is the period most critics and fans identify as the absolute peak of the show's creative achievement. Al Jean and Mike Rice ran Season 4 before handing off to David Merkin for Seasons 5 and 6. The writing staff in this period included Greg Daniels, who would later create The Office and Parks and Recreation. Conan O'Brien was still present for Season 4 before leaving for The Tonight Show. The talent density in this writing room was extraordinary. The stories became more ambitious, the emotional range expanded further, the satire sharpened. Marge versus the Monorail happened in Season 4. Homer at the Bat happened in Season 3. The Who Shot Mr. Burns cliffhanger straddled Seasons 6 and 7. Cape Fear, Homer's Enemy, You Only Move Twice, and many of the show's most critically celebrated episodes were produced in this window. And this creates a specific challenge for sleep mapping, because the seasons that contain the greatest artistic achievement are also the seasons with the most F-tier and C-tier content. The ambition that made this period great is the same quality that makes it less reliably sleep-friendly than Seasons 1 through 3. When a writing staff is at the height of its powers, it is writing to engage, not to accompany. It is crafting jokes to land, not to drift past. It is constructing stories that demand your attention, not stories that release you from it. There is, however, a counter-argument, and the counter-argument is the domestic episodes. Even in this peak creative period, when the writers were at their most ambitious and most clever, the show never entirely abandoned the warm domestic episodes that make up the B tier and A tier of this ranking. And Maggie Makes 3 is from Season 6. Lisa's Wedding is from Season 6. A Millhouse Divided is from Season 8. These seasons produced great sleep content alongside great television, and the task is simply to find the former within the latter. The key to using Seasons 4 through 6 as sleep content is selection. You cannot put on a random episode from this period and expect reliable sleep value. You need to know which episodes you are choosing and why. The high-ambition episodes will keep you up. The domestic episodes will carry you through. Overall sleep rating for Seasons 4 through 6. Medium to high, high ceiling, but requires curation. Seasons 7 and 8, 1995 to 1997. These two seasons are where the debate about the show's golden era gets complicated. The BBC noted in 2010 that many critics and fans placed the end of the golden era somewhere around Season 8 or 9. Season 8 is the season that contains Homer's Enemy, the highest-rated episode in the show's IMDb history, and one of the least sleep-friendly episodes ever produced. It is also the season that contains A Millhouse Divided, which we have placed in A tier. The tension in Seasons 7 and 8 is the tension of a show at the top of its game, but beginning to show the first signs of what that game costs. The stories are still largely grounded, the characters are still largely consistent, the emotional warmth is still present in significant quantities, but the ambition has pushed into territory that is occasionally darker, occasionally more chaotic, and occasionally less compatible with the kind of emotional safety that sleep content requires. Homer's Enemy, which aired in Season 8, is a prime example of this. It is a masterpiece. It is also the episode that looks at the fundamental premise of The Simpsons, a lovable, incompetent man succeeding without trying, and asks the question that the show had always carefully avoided asking. Is this actually okay? Is the world of Springfield actually fair? And the answer it provides is devastating. No, it is not okay. It has never been okay. Frank Grimes was right about all of it. That episode could not have been made in Season 2. The show was not ready to ask that question in Season 2. By Season 8, it was ready, and the fact that it was ready tells you something about how the show had changed. From a sleep perspective, Seasons 7 and 8 require the same curation that Seasons 4 through 6 required. The domestic episodes remain reliable. The ambitious episodes are often impossible. The ratio of reliable sleep content is slightly lower than in the early seasons. Overall sleep rating for Seasons 7 and 8. Medium to high, still strong domestic content, but requires more careful selection. Seasons 9 through 12. 1997 to 2001. This is the era that many fans identify as the beginning of the decline. The BBC cited the common critical consensus as placing the end of the golden era around Season 9. Showrunner Mike Scully ran Seasons 9 through 12, and the changes that happened under his tenure, more chaotic plots, less grounded character behavior, a greater reliance on celebrity cameos and pop culture references, have been the subject of considerable fan debate ever since. From a sleep perspective, this period presents a specific challenge. The stories became more kinetic, the emotional stakes inflated. Plots that in the classic era would have resolved with a quiet domestic moment began resolving with more elaborate, more active conclusions. The warm domestic episodes that powered the B tier and A tier of the classic era became less frequent, replaced by stories that move faster and aim for bigger laughs. There is, however, something that partially compensates for these changes from a sleep perspective, and that something is Alf Clausen. The music in seasons 9 through 12 is still Alf Clausen. The 35-piece orchestra is still there. The warm woodwinds and gentle brass that have been accompanying Springfield since the early 90s are still playing underneath these stories. And that musical continuity provides a sonic floor of comfort that persists, even when the stories above it have become louder and more chaotic. The effect is a bit like listening to a lullaby being played in a room where the furniture has been rearranged. The room is different, but the music is the same, and the music is where sleep lives. There are still reliable sleep episodes in seasons 9 through 12. The clip shows from this era, including All Singing, All Dancing from season 9, are, as discussed, among the most effective sleep content in the catalog regardless of their creative merit. Individual domestic episodes scattered through these seasons carry the warmth of the classic era even when they arrive surrounded by less restful material. Overall sleep rating for seasons 9 through 12. Medium. Lower sleep density than the classic era, but not without reliable options. Seasons 13 through 20, 2001 to 2009. This is the longest continuous stretch of the show's history from a single era, and it is also the most variable from a sleep perspective. The showrunners changed multiple times. Al Jean returned as showrunner from season 13 onward and has remained in that role, with Matt Selman taking increasing responsibility in later seasons. The stories in this era are genuinely difficult to characterize as a unified block. Some of them are very good, some of them are very poor. The show experimented with format-breaking episodes during this period, including the Emmy-winning Eternal Moonshine of the Simpson Mind in season 19, which uses a fragmented memory loss structure that is formally ambitious but not remotely sleep-friendly. The show also produced warmer, quieter episodes in this era that carry genuine B-tier sleep value. The animation transitioned to high definition in season 20 with the new widescreen opening sequence that debuted in 2009. This transition changed the visual texture of the show in ways that have subtle implications for sleep. The HD animation is crisper and more precise than the standard definition animation that preceded it. The characters look slightly less handmade. The warmth of the earlier visual style, which was partly a function of the technical limitations of standard definition broadcast, was replaced by something cleaner and slightly more clinical. Alf Clausen remained the composer through this entire period, which continued to provide a musical buffer of warmth that made even the lower quality episodes more sleep compatible than they might otherwise have been. Overall sleep rating for seasons 13 through 20. Medium to low, reliable options exist but require significant curation. Seasons 21 through 28, 2009 to 2017. This is the modern standard definition to high definition era, and it contains within it a moment that permanently altered the sonic landscape of the show. In 2017, as a cost-cutting measure, Alf Clausen was dismissed after 27 years and nearly 600 scored episodes. He was replaced by Bleeding Fingers Music, a company co-founded by Hans Zimmer and Russell Emanuel, with additional contributions from Austin Wintory and other composers. The effect of this change on the show's sleep value was significant. Alf Clausen's orchestral underscore had been one of the most reliable pillars of The Simpsons as a sleep artifact. The specific warmth of his woodwinds, the specific weight of his brass, the specific texture of 35 live musicians playing in service of the Simpson family's ordinary life was not just background music. It was emotional infrastructure. It was the sonic equivalent of a familiar room. It was the reason that even a mediocre episode from the Clausen era felt warmer and safer than it might have on paper. The Bleeding Finger scores are technically accomplished. They are not the same. They do not have the same warmth. They do not have the same sense of a specific person who has spent 27 years learning exactly what Springfield needs to sound like. The post-2017 episodes sound competently scored. They do not sound like home. From a sleep perspective, this means that episodes from before the 2017 transition carry an inherent advantage over episodes after it, regardless of their other qualities. If you are building a sleep playlist and you are choosing between two otherwise equivalent episodes, one from the Clausen era and one from after, the Clausen era episode will almost always serve you better. Overall sleep rating for seasons 21 through 28. Low to medium. The loss of Clausen's score after season 28 is the single biggest downward shift in the show's sleep value from any non-creative factor. Seasons 29 through 32. 2017 to 2021. These are the seasons immediately following Clausen's departure and the first seasons produced entirely under the Bleeding Finger score. They are also the seasons produced during and immediately before the COVID-19 pandemic, which affected production schedules and, by season 32, forced the show to produce entirely through remote work for the first time in its history. The remote production season, season 32, is notable for having managed the transition without missing a single episode, which is a logistical achievement. The creative quality of season 32 has been assessed differently by different critics, but for sleep purposes, the more relevant quality is the texture of the production. And remote-produced episodes have a slightly different feel to them that is difficult to quantify but present in the performance and editing rhythms. From a sleep perspective, these seasons are challenging. The absence of Clausen's score is fully felt. The stories are inconsistent. Individual episodes carry sleep value, but the general tenor of these seasons is louder, faster, and less warm than the classic era. Overall sleep rating for seasons 29 through 32. Low, seasons 33 through 37, 2021 to present. And now we arrive at the era that nobody expected, the modern Renaissance. Matt Selman began serving as primary showrunner in a meaningful way from season 33 onward, with Selman announced as sole showrunner from season 38, with Al Jean moving to a consulting producer role. And under Selman's increased influence, something happened to The Simpsons that seemed, based on the trajectory of the preceding decade, almost impossible. It got better. Not in every episode, not consistently or predictably, but in ways that were recognizable to longtime fans and notable enough to receive serious critical attention. Rotten Tomatoes scores for recent seasons have trended upward. Season 29 received a perfect 100% score from critics. Season 27 received 80%. The narrative was shifting. The modern Selman-era episodes are characterized by more ambitious storytelling, non-linear structures, cinematic direction, and a willingness to take genuine creative risks that the show had avoided for years. A Serious Flanders in season 33 presented two episodes that were entirely non-canonical crime dramas that reimagined Ned Flanders as a crime kingpin. The format was a complete departure from anything the show had previously attempted. It was also, for sleep purposes, the least effective content the show had produced in years, because genuine creative ambition is inherently alerting. The quiet domestic episodes of the modern era are warmer than they have been in the post-Clausen period, because Selman has pushed for more emotional depth and more character grounding. But the sonic landscape is still different. The Bleeding Finger score, while improving as the composers settle into the rhythms of the show, still does not have the specific warmth of Alf Clausen's orchestra. That warmth is not coming back. From a sleep perspective, the modern era is a mixed proposition. The best domestic episodes of seasons 33 through 37 carry genuine B-tier and occasional A-tier sleep value. The format-breaking and experimental episodes are F-tier or C-tier. The general sleep density is medium, which is higher than the immediately preceding seasons, but still well below the classic era. In December 2025, Disney announced that The Simpsons had surpassed 1 billion hours streamed on Disney Plus during that year. That number includes the modern episodes, it includes the classic episodes, it includes everything from Simpsons roasting on an open fire in 1989 to whatever is airing in season 37 right now. The audience is still there. The billion hours are still happening, and a significant portion of those hours are happening late at night with someone lying on their side in the dark, letting Springfield carry them somewhere else. Overall sleep rating for seasons 33 through 37, medium. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. We have ranked the episodes, we have mapped the seasons. But there is a question underneath all of this that we have been circling without fully answering, and it is the most important question this video can ask. Why does Springfield work? Not why is it a good show, not why has it lasted 36 years, and why do people still watch it? Those are questions with documented answers. The Simpsons works as a television show because it is brilliantly written and sharply observed and emotionally genuine in ways that most comedies never achieve. The awards, the viewership records, the critical recognition, all of it is earned. But why does Springfield specifically work as a place to fall asleep in? That is a different question. And the answer is one that the show itself has been quietly constructing since December 17th, 1989, without ever having to say it out loud. Springfield is a world that does not change. Think about what that means for a moment. Really think about it. Bart Simpson is 10 years old. He has been 10 years old since October 11th, 1990, the night Bart Gets an F aired, and 33.6 million people watched him cry because he failed a history exam. He was 10 years old then. He is 10 years old now. He will be 10 years old in the episodes that are airing during seasons 36 and 37. He will be 10 years old in season 40, which the show has been renewed to produce. The show has addressed this directly over the years. The concept of the floating timeline, where the characters' histories are periodically updated to match contemporary settings while the characters themselves never age, has been discussed by the production team as a deliberate and structural choice. The show does not ignore time, it acknowledges it. It just does not let time do to Springfield what it does to everywhere else. Homer still works at the Springfield nuclear power plant for Mr. Burns. Marge still stands in the kitchen. The kids still go to Springfield Elementary. Ned Flanders still lives next door. Moe still runs the tavern. Chief Wiggum still responds to emergencies in ways that make things slightly worse. The core infrastructure of Springfield, the set of relationships and places and routines that make up its daily life, is permanently in place. And here's the thing about permanent. The thing about a world that does not change. Your brain, which is a biological system that has been shaped by evolution to monitor the environment for threats, relaxes in a permanent world in a way that it cannot relax in a world that changes. When things change, something in your brain wakes up to track the change. When things stay the same, that tracking function is allowed to power down. Springfield is not just a fictional town. It is, for the portion of your brain that monitors the environment for threats, a null environment. A place where nothing new is happening. A place where the status quo is always going to be restored. A place where no matter what chaos erupts during the episode, the family is going to be together at the end, and the town is going to be exactly as it was when the episode began. The Simpsons is a show about things that do not stay the same and a world that always does. That combination, the surface turbulence of each individual story against the permanent stability of the world in which those stories occur, is why it works for sleep. You can watch the surface move without being disturbed by it because you know, at a level deeper than conscious thought, that the foundation is not going anywhere. Now consider what Alf Clausen actually built across those 27 years. The Danny Elfman theme, which Elfman reportedly wrote on the drive home from his initial meeting with Matt Groening in 1989, is one of the most recognized pieces of music in the history of American television. Elfman has said it was one of the easiest compositions he ever wrote, and that it became the most popular piece in his entire career. The theme has never been replaced. It has been rearranged slightly, and the Alf Clausen arrangement that became standard from season 3 onward is the one most viewers know. But the melody itself is unchanged from the version that played under the first episodes in 1989. Think about that sentence. The melody that plays over the opening credits of The Simpsons has not changed since 1989. You have been hearing that melody for your entire life, or for most of it, or for as long as you have been watching the show. It is in your memory at a level that is prior to conscious awareness. The moment it begins, your brain recognizes it before you have processed that you are hearing it. And that recognition, that immediate preconscious familiarity, is one of the most sleep-compatible experiences your brain can have. It is the sonic equivalent of the smell of your childhood home. It is immediately and completely safe. Alf Clausen built on that foundation for 27 years. He wrote music for nearly 600 episodes. He conducted a live 35-piece orchestra that played the underscore for every domestic scene, every quiet moment, every late evening at the kitchen table, and every morning in the backyard, and every drive through Springfield in Homer's pink car. That orchestra was always there, and the specific warmth of live acoustic instruments playing in service of a cartoon family's ordinary life created a sonic texture that is unlike anything else in television. String sections have been used as emotional manipulation tools in film and television since the invention of sound in cinema. They signal feeling, they guide the audience toward the intended response. In action films, they build tension. In tragedies, they generate grief. In The Simpsons, across most of Alf Clausen's tenure, they did something more specific and more unusual. They signaled safety, not happiness exactly. Safety. The difference between those two things is significant. Happiness is a state. Safety is an environment. You can be safe without being happy. You can be in a safe environment while experiencing something bittersweet or melancholy or quietly sad. And that is the precise register of Alf Clausen's underscore for the domestic episodes. It does not tell you everything is wonderful, it tells you that everything is going to be okay. And it tells you that in a way that your body believes. Your body believing something that your underscore is telling it is not a mystical process. It is a conditioned response. 27 years of Alf Clausen's warmth playing underneath Springfield's ordinary life has trained an enormous number of viewers to associate that specific sound with safety. The warmth of the woodwinds, the weight of the brass, the particular way Clausen handled the transitions between scenes, all of it says the same thing every time it plays. You are in Springfield. Nothing is going to happen to you here. And your body, which has heard that message hundreds of times, believes it. There's one more thing worth saying about Springfield as a sleep environment, and it is the thing that the show itself says most clearly and most directly in the episode. And Maggie makes 3. Homer is at his workstation. The plaque says, "Don't forget. You're here forever." He has covered the letters with photos of Maggie. The visible words read, "Do it for her." This image has been interpreted by critics and fans as a statement about parenthood, about sacrifice, about the way love makes bearable the things that would otherwise be unendurable. All of those interpretations are correct, but there is another reading, one that is less discussed but equally present in the image. The plaque was meant to be a punishment. Mr. Burns installed it to humiliate Homer, to remind him that he was trapped, that the life he had not chosen was the life he was going to live. Don't forget. You're here forever. Those words, in the context Burns intended them, are a sentence, a verdict. You're stuck here and you know it, and I want you to know that I know it too. Homer's response was not to remove the plaque. It was to cover it with something that made staying bearable. He did not escape the thing that was keeping him. He changed what it meant to be there. That is what Springfield is for the people who fall asleep to it. The world is difficult. The days are long. The things that need doing do not stop needing doing, and the quiet that you need at the end of a long day does not arrive easily. But you put on The Simpsons, you let Homer drive his pink car through a town that never changes. You let Marge stand in the kitchen with her blue hair piled up on top of her head. You let the kids argue about something small and unimportant and completely resolved within 22 minutes. And you let Alf Clausen's orchestra play underneath all of it. And you cover the plaque with something warmer. And you sleep. A brief note on the specific mechanics of choosing your episode. The research here is consistent with what the 5 pillars outlined at the beginning of this video. The Season 1 through Season 8 episodes carry the highest sleep density, particularly those from Seasons 2 and 3, which contain the purest combination of slow pacing, domestic stakes, Alf Clausen's developing orchestral voice, and the warm, melancholy register that defines the show's best sleep content. Within those seasons, the domestic episodes outperform the ambitious episodes. The quiet ones outperform the funny ones. The flashback episodes outperform the present tense episodes. The episodes about small things outperform the episodes about large things. And the clip shows, despite everything critics have ever said about them, remain among the most functionally effective sleep content in the show's entire history. Do not be embarrassed by the clip shows. Everything we have covered in this video has been building toward this. Not just a ranking of what works and what does not, but a practical, usable, verified guide to constructing the ideal Simpsons sleep session. a playlist that takes everything we know about pacing, stakes, music, familiarity, and emotional temperature, and arranges it in the specific order that gives you the best possible chance of drifting off somewhere in the middle of Springfield. This playlist assumes that you have access to Disney Plus, which is where the full Simpsons catalog currently lives, and where in December 2025, Disney confirmed the show surpassed 1 billion hours streamed in a single year. The episodes are available there in their complete forms in the correct aspect ratio with the original music intact. The playlist is not long, 5 episodes. Approximately 2 hours of television. You will not need all 5, you never need all 5. But they are arranged in order of increasing sleep value so that you can let the playlist carry you deeper. As the night progresses, each episode slightly warmer and slightly quieter than the one before it. Episode 1, The Way We Was, Season 2. Episode 12, January 31st, 1991. Start here. This is your on-ramp. The flashback structure, the 1974 high school setting, the story of how Homer and Marge met, all of this gives you something genuinely engaging to follow without requiring the kind of active cognitive processing that would keep you too alert. You're watching a love story you already know the ending of. You're watching 2 young people in the past, which means the stakes have already been resolved by the time you sit down to watch. Homer gets the girl. You know this, and knowing it lets you lean back rather than lean forward. The Alf Clausen underscore for this episode has a specific nostalgic warmth that is distinct even from his other work. The 1974 setting seemed to unlock something in the way he wrote for it. A golden-tinted musical quality that matches the visual aesthetic of the flashback sequences. This episode will carry you from fully awake to pleasantly drowsy. It will not put you all the way to sleep. It is the beginning of the process, not the completion of it. Let it do its work. By the time Homer's playing French horn badly at the prom and Marge is watching him from across the room with something she has not yet named, you should be in a state where the next episode can take you further. Episode 2, Homer Loves Flanders, Season 5. Episode 16, March 17th, 1994. This is your transition episode. The tone drops slightly from the nostalgic warmth of The Way We Was to something more comedic but still gentle. Homer's overwhelming enthusiasm for his new friendship with Ned Flanders has a specific quality that is funny without being sharp. The jokes are warm, the comedic conflict, Homer being too much, is entirely without threat. And the resolution, the friendship fading back to its natural and comfortable state of mild mutual annoyance, is one of the most reliably sleep-inducing endings in the show's history. By the time this episode ends, with Homer and Ned back in their respective positions as neighbors who are slightly tired of each other, the world of Springfield should feel like it has settled into its permanent configuration. Everything is exactly where it was. Nothing changed. The status quo was briefly disturbed and then gently restored. That gentle restoration is a signal your brain has been waiting for. The thing that needed to happen has happened. The story is over. The world is okay. Let your eyes go heavier. Episode 3, Bart the Lover, Season 3, Episode 16. February 13th, 1992. If you are still awake at this point, this is the episode that will usually finish the job. The A-plot of Bart, anonymously writing to Mrs. Krabappel, is one of the most quietly, emotionally honest storylines in the show's history. The B-plot of the family working together at the kitchen table to help Homer swear less is domestic comedy at its most gentle and most warm. The kitchen table scenes in particular have a specific quality that no other setting in the show replicates. There's something about a family gathered around a table at night, doing something small together, that your brain registers as the deepest expression of home. Not the couch, not the dinner table. The kitchen table, late at night, with a project in front of everyone and nowhere to be. The episode ends with Bart writing a letter to a lonely woman who needed someone to be kind to her, with help from his family. There is no dramatic payoff, no twist, no reversal, just a small act of decency made possible by the people around him. And Mrs. Krabappel smiling alone in her apartment. By the time that final scene plays, the soft orchestral swell of Alf Clausen doing exactly what he was born to do, you should be very close to gone. Episode 4, And Maggie Makes 3, Season 6, Episode 13. January 22nd, 1995. If episodes 1 through 3 have not finished the job, put this on. This is the safety net. The final line of defense between you and another hour of lying awake staring at the ceiling. We have told the story. Homer's workstation, the plaque, the photos. Do it for her. But there is something about watching this episode in the 4th position of a sleep playlist that makes it more effective than watching it in isolation. By the time you get here, you have been in Springfield for approximately 90 minutes. The world is familiar, the rhythms are established, the warmth is accumulated. Your brain has been receiving the signal for 90 minutes that says, this is a safe place, nothing is going to happen, you're allowed to let go. And then in Maggie Makes 3 plays its final scene. Homer's face covered with photos of his daughter, the modified plaque, the music, the silence after the music. And you let go. Episode 5, Any Clip Show, Season 4 through Season 9. This one is here for the exceptional cases, for the people who have been awake for a long time and for whom even, and Maggie Makes 3, was not quite enough. For the nights when sleep is particularly far away and requires additional patience. Put on a clip show. So it's come to this, a Simpsons clip show, Season 4, Episode 18. Or another Simpsons clip show, Season 6, Episode 3. Or All Singing, All Dancing, Season 9, Episode 11. It does not matter which one, pick any of them. There is nothing new in a clip show, nothing to track, nothing to follow, no new emotional territory to navigate. Only Alf Clausen playing warmly underneath footage you have already internalized. Scenes you have already processed a dozen times, a world you already know completely. You are not watching a clip show, you are being held by one, and within a few minutes, Springfield will do what it has been doing for the better part of 3.5 decades. It will take care of you. There is a final thing worth saying about all of this. The Simpsons has been on the air since December 17th, 1989. In April of 2025, it was announced that the show had been renewed through Season 40, with a deal that extends it through the 2028 to 2029 television season. That would take the show to its 40th season. It would add 15 Fox broadcast episodes per season, plus Disney Plus exclusive specials, to a catalog that already has over 800 entries, 800 episodes, 36 years, 37 Emmy wins, 2 Peabody Awards, the first animated series to receive the Peabody, Time Magazine's greatest television series of the 20th century, a Hollywood Walk of Fame star at 7021 Hollywood Boulevard, awarded to the Simpson family on January 14, 2000. 1 billion hours streamed in a single year on a single platform. Those are the numbers. Those are the facts. They are verifiable. They are documented. They are the external evidence of a show that reached a scale that nobody in 1989, including the people who made it, fully anticipated. But the number that actually matters for what this video is about is the one we cannot verify. The number of times someone has fallen asleep to this show in the last 36 years. The number of times the familiar yellow shapes on a darkened screen were the last thing someone saw before they drifted off. The number of times Alf Clausen's orchestra played its warm, specific, unrepeatable music into a quiet room and did what it was, perhaps without anyone intending it, built to do. That number is not in any database. But it is enormous, and somewhere in a bedroom right now, in a house, in a city, in a country that has spent 36 years importing Springfield into its living rooms and bedrooms and waiting rooms and late nights, someone is putting on The Simpsons. They are not sitting up to watch it. They are lying down. The screen is the only light. The volume is low enough to hear, but not so loud that it pulls you all the way back to the surface. They do not need to know who shot Mr. Burns. They do not need to follow the mystery or track the clues or stay awake for the reveal. They just need Springfield to be there, exactly as it was, exactly as it has always been. Bart is 10, Lisa is 8, Maggie is on her pacifier, Homer is in his pink car, Marge is in the kitchen, Alf Clausen is playing something warm underneath all of it. And the world, for 22 minutes, is a safe and permanent place. That is not a small thing. That is the whole thing. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you, genuinely. Subscribe if you have not already. There is more where this came from, and the next one is already on its way. Sleep well. A few more entries that deserve their place in the record. on The Simpsons Christmas special and why December is the best month to watch. Every December, the question of what to put on before bed becomes slightly easier because the seasonal context adds a layer of warmth to anything Christmas-related that does not require the show to do any additional work. Simpsons Roasting on an Open Fire Season 1, Episode 1 is the obvious choice and the correct one, but there are other Christmas episodes scattered through the show's history that carry sleep value during the holiday season in ways they might not carry in July. Miracle on Evergreen Terrace, Season 9, Episode 10, which aired on December 21, 1997, is one. It is not a perfect episode. The plot involves Bart destroying the family's Christmas tree and the subsequent community response, and it has some of the sharpness that the Season 9 era brought to the show's storytelling. But the Christmas setting provides enough ambient warmth to offset the sharper edges, and by the end of the episode, the family is together, which is the only resolution Christmas episodes really need. The Springfield Christmas aesthetic, the town covered in snow, the lights in the windows, the specific color palette that the animators use for the holiday episodes, does something to the visual texture of the show that the non-Christmas episodes cannot replicate. Springfield Under Snow is Springfield at its most intimate. The snow quiets everything. The familiar shapes of the town become softer. And soft shapes in a quiet town at night are, for the purposes of this ranking, exactly what we need. Sleep rating for Christmas context episodes elevated by one full tier across the board during the month of December. On why the Brian and Stewie dynamic from Family Guy gets talked about, and the Homer and Barney dynamic from The Simpsons does not. This is a small observation, but a genuine one. Homer's friendship with Barney Gumble, the town's most committed drunk, is one of the quietest and most consistently warm dynamics in the show's history. Unlike the more dramatically elaborated friendships in the show, Homer and Barney's relationship is almost entirely nonverbal in its emotional content. They sit at Moe's Tavern, they watch television. They occasionally have a conversation that goes somewhere unexpectedly genuine. And then they go back to sitting. The episodes that focus on Homer and Barney together are among the gentler episodes in the catalog. Barney's antics in early seasons, his occasional moments of unexpected depth and artistry, most famously the documentary film he produces for the Springfield Film Festival in A Star is Born, Season 6, Episode 18. All of these elements combine to make the Homer-Barney episodes among the most underrated sleep content in the show's history. There is no urgency between these two men. There is no goal. There is just the specific companionship of two people who've been sitting next to each other for a very long time and are comfortable with exactly that. Sleep rating, B+ as a category, on the significance of the evening episodes. One last thing, and this is the most specific observation in this entire video, which is saying something given how specific we have been getting. A significant number of The Simpsons' most sleep-valuable episodes take place, either in setting or in emotional register, at night. The scenes that work best for sleep are not the daytime scenes, not the school scenes or the work scenes or the outdoor scenes in the bright, animated sunlight of a Springfield afternoon. The scenes that work best are the night scenes. Homer in the backyard after dark, looking up. Marge in the kitchen with the light above the counter still on. The family at the table in the evening when the house has gotten quiet. The bedroom scenes where someone says something honest because the darkness makes honesty easier. Night scenes in The Simpsons have a specific visual quality. The palette shifts. The yellows of the character's skin become warmer against the darker backgrounds. The lights inside the house seem more significant when everything outside is dark. There is a coziness to the night interior of the Simpson house that the daytime interior does not have, because the contrast between the warmth inside and the dark outside is part of what makes warmth feel like warmth. When you are falling asleep to The Simpsons, the night scenes are where you go deepest. The daytime scenes keep you slightly more alert. The night scenes pull you down. Find the episodes with the most night scenes, or simply wait for the night scenes to come and let them do the work. On what 1 billion hours actually means. In December 2025, Disney confirmed that The Simpsons had surpassed 1 billion hours streamed on Disney Plus during that year alone. Not total, not since the platform launched, in 1 year. 1 billion hours is approximately 114,000 years. It is a number so large that it becomes abstract almost immediately when you try to hold it in your head. But here's a way to make it concrete. If you took 1 billion hours of Simpsons watching and assigned it to a single person, that person would need to start watching in the year 112,000 BCE, roughly around the time that anatomically modern humans were first appearing in the fossil record in Africa, and watch continuously without stopping, without sleeping, without doing anything else, and they would just now be finishing. A significant portion of those 1 billion hours were watched by people who were asleep. This is not a small or marginal use of the show. This is one of its primary uses. This is what The Simpsons is, among many other things. It is the place people go when the day is over and they need somewhere to be for 22 minutes before they can let everything go. Springfield has been waiting. It is still waiting. It will keep waiting. Homer's in his car. Marge is in the kitchen. The kids are upstairs. Alf Clausen is warming up the orchestra in the studio on the other side of the recording glass. Danny Elfman's melody is about to start. Put it on, close your eyes. You are already home.